All right. Hello, everybody. And on behalf of all of us behind the scenes here today, welcome to this event focused on envisioning the future of doctoral studies based on the experiences of the 2020-2021 Concordia Public Scholar Cohort. A warm welcome to all participating students, special invited guests, and audience members, and of course, our SGS colleagues. So as you're getting settled into the webinar here, I'll just tell you a little bit about ForSpace. For those of you unfamiliar with us, welcome to our virtual channel. The space itself is located in downtown Jojage, Montreal, on unceded Indigenous land. And it's a university-wide platform that connects the public with the inner workings of Concordia University, basically by activating the various research projects, teaching, and cross-disciplinary initiatives brewing across the university. So given that we work with faculty members and students to connect you with their work, we've had the tremendous pleasure of working with this cohort of public scholars who you'll hear from today, individually and in groups throughout this year. And before we get started, we'd just like to congratulate you and thank you all for the incredible output you've produced, especially during challenging circumstances this year. So I'll just remind the audience that we are recording and streaming this event, and I'll pop those links in the chat in a second. And the Q&A has been activated for you and your questions during the question period and for all of you to see. So on that note, I'll pass it over to Faye Diamantoudi, Interim Dean of the School of Graduate Studies. Over to you, Faye.
Thank you. Good morning, good afternoon, rather, everybody. My name is Faye Diamantoudi, and I'm the Interim Dean of Graduate Studies and a Professor of Economics. It is my pleasure to welcome you today to our discussion with the 4th edition of Public Scholars. The Public Scholars program was created in 2017 in partnership with the Montreal Gazette to support engagement between our graduate research and the broader community. Every year, 10 exceptional PhD candidates are selected from across Concordia. They participate in strategic professional workshops designed to provide them with the skills to effectively communicate and engage with the public. Our 2020 cohort launched in May last year and had been working towards a celebratory in-person event this spring to showcase their journey. An extraordinary journey over 2 waves of a pandemic, engaging on the 3rd nonetheless. Today's discussion is our opportunity to pick their brains and learn how this journey has influenced their graduate studies and their environment. But before we get to our public scholars, we would like to welcome Dr. Brad Nelson, Associate Dean at the School of Graduate Studies, in charge of academic programs and development. Dr. Nelson will share some perspectives on PhD career outcomes and how those should influence doctoral studies. Brad, the floor is yours.
Thanks very much, Faye. Welcome, everybody. I'm very happy to be here this afternoon. Very grateful to receive the invitation to speak from the Public Scholars. I'd also like to thank Christy and Rasha for putting this together, and Rasha in particular for taking over the Public Scholars in a very difficult year. I think this is a great event to try and wrap up the school year, if not the pandemic. With a discussion about PhD studies and their future. It's a very, very topical issue. I just spoke to this issue at the Northeastern Association of Graduate Schools about 2 weeks ago. And just in the last 2 days, in my inbox have landed a couple of very interesting documents, one from the Council of Graduate Schools, which is a statement of principles and commitments of graduate deans supporting mental health and well-being for graduate students. And it's also a toolkit. But what I really like about it is that it's organized around values that recognize the importance of student-centered education and the educational environments that support the whole student, not just the academic part of the student. They also incorporate values around equity, diversity, and inclusion, and also transparency in our program requirements and in what we hold available, what we have available for graduate students in terms of mental health and their well-being. And the same day, I got a communication from the Canadian Association of Graduate Schools, which is working on the same sort of topic, but from a more academic standpoint. It's a task force on excellence in graduate programs, which was formed in 2019. And they've produced sort of a preliminary report and also a toolkit for holding consultations, although we appear to be ahead of the wave on the consultations because the questions that we'll be discussing today are right in their wheelhouse. And I think we have a couple of topics that they're not touching on that I think we should probably share with them in the form of a memo after our conversation today. But one of the things they've done is redefine graduate studies or redefine excellence in graduate studies. They say excellence in graduate education means that upon completion of their education, students are well positioned for successful careers. And that's quite a change from how we generally define success in graduate education. Well, yes and no. Yes, in the sense we're concentrating on the student's career, but as the text makes clear, that career doesn't exclusively mean reproducing the university professor, right? And we all have seen all of the not so encouraging statistics in terms of how many PhD graduates go on to secure tenure track positions. And so CAGS is trying to respond to this by focusing on student education, while CGS is concentrating on an institutional approach to mental health. And I think that both of these perspectives are very important, and they both need to be brought to bear on the future of doctoral education. In particular, CGS, they take an institutional holistic approach to mental health and well-being, one that includes the mental health and well-being of supervisors and PhD mentors, which I think is very, very important as we're seeing in a year like the one we're experiencing now. But their point is to try to figure out how to create an environment so that graduate students can thrive and not merely survive graduate school. As I said earlier, CAGS is concentrating more on the individual student, looking at expectations, outcomes, and the relevance of these expectations and outcomes. And they add a lot of expectations dealing with the acquisition of different skills, including communication as the kind of communication skills that public scholars have been working on this year, and other areas such as project management, leadership, collaboration, interpersonal skills, the kinds of things that Grad Pro Skills actually has been working with and teaching graduate students since its inception, right? Concordia has been ahead of the curve in a lot of these areas through the last several years, one of them being Grad Pro Skills that I just mentioned. Not only Grad Pro Skills and the number of workshops and the kinds of topics, but the incredibly swift pivot that the unit took to an online delivery of its workshops, which was quite almost miraculous, the turnaround that took place in Grad Pro Skills. The Public Scholars Program is another innovation that Concordia has developed, one that still doesn't have an equal in Canada. There are other Public Scholars programs, but none of them include the kinds of education and engagement with the public that our students enjoy. Other programs such as the Horizon Postdoctoral Program have added to not just opportunities for PhD graduates after, but in improving the research environment of Concordia by bringing in so many highly qualified postdoctoral scholars. The 3-minute thesis event, which we just held our finals last week, is another way in which Concordia has really led the way across Canada in developing a program, and also in the kinds of success that our 3MT winners have had, not just in Canada, but internationally as well. And more recent initiatives such as the Versatile PhD. These are all ways that, that universities are attempting to broaden the professional skills education of our PhD graduates. And I hope that you've been able to take advantage of most, if not all of these. There are still some things, however, that aren't being discussed or dealt with in what I would say in as productive a way as could be either by CGS or by CAGS. And some of these topics we're going to be talking about today, right? As I said, the CAGS initiative is centering on the acquisition of professional skills and the incorporation of professional skills formally into PhD curricula, but they don't say a lot about how that's going to affect time to completion. And also for those PhDs who have managed to land careers outside of academia, they can tell you that it's one thing to have these professional skills, and it's another one to accumulate the experience that industries or other institutions outside of academia are looking for when they make new hires. And so I think experiential learning is one thing that needs to be incorporated in a much more fulsome and robust way in all of these recommendations and toolkits for improving graduate education in the future. And I think that another one is that we're going to be looking at today, which actually hadn't occurred to me before either, is the sustainability of graduate studies moving into the future. And I was very happy to see that topic. And I'm very happy to see that the two of the topics are well, one of them is something that I've been pushing myself. Two of them are ideas that haven't been discussed very much in terms of the future of PhD education. And so I think that we have a lot to contribute to this conversation, not just today, but in the future. And I'm looking forward to hearing your ideas because after all, you are the ones experiencing this education. And I think you guys should have the last word, at least today, on where we should take our programs. Thank you.
Thank you, Brad. This has been really a great introduction to our panel discussion. And the first theme on our panel discussion is on teaching and learning. And what have we learned from the pandemic? What will we retain? So I will address our first question to Rachel and Bettina. Dr. Nelson spoke about the importance of experiential learning as part of the doctoral program. Many doctoral students have the objective of teaching after they graduate. What opportunities have you had to develop your teaching experience, and were these impacted by the pandemic? This past year has led us to question how we teach, moving away from the standard synchronous delivery to adopt more hybrid, asynchronous, and experiential techniques. How has this past year redefined your teaching philosophy?
Would you like to go first, Bettina?
Sure, I can go first. Hello, everyone. Well, this pandemic has impacted both my teaching and my learning because I've been teaching at Concordia. I ran a 2-semester course together with a colleague called Convergence at Neuroscience and Society. So I taught a studio component in art, and that is actually very tricky to do online. At first, I wasn't quite sure how to do this. But in the end, we decided to use the digital platform as an asset and not as a speed bump. So you can actually leverage a lot of the components of digital and remote learning, such as focusing more on the digital arts and computational arts. We focused more on iteration, experimentation, group work and teamwork that you can still do on the Zoom platform if you have breakout rooms. Really loved the chats that were happening. I mean, we're in Zoom right now, so you know how that works. You can have a little chat on the side. And this is actually lovely when you're teaching because there's this whole discussion that takes place while I'm talking as a professor, and the students can engage with each other, especially those that maybe not very talkative. So I'm actually hoping that some of those digital components will remain once we go back to in-person or hybrid teaching. So it's just, it's what you make of the situation. And I think I'm in art education, so I'm learning about pedagogy, and I'm learning to take what I have, focus on the students, and improvise. How about you, Rachel? What was your experience like?
what an experience it was teaching this year. I taught a sort of like a survey course out of the Simone de Beauvoir Institute. And it was all students that were really interested in being there. They really wanted to know more about the subject that I was teaching about. And so that, I think in that sense, that was really lucky for me because I always had their attention. They were always interested. They were always doing the readings, and that was wonderful. But I know just speaking with them as students, as undergraduate students, I had a few that were first and second years. And this was sort of their first experience of being in a university course or university courses rather. And I think a lot of them found it exceptionally difficult to have a university sort of new university experience just with everything being online. And that was hard on a few of them. I know a few were saying that I have to do 2 and 3 and 4 hour lectures every day. And it's getting really rough sitting in front of my computer for that amount of time. And, not really being able to engage with anyone. Yes, you have a little bit of an opportunity to while you're on Zoom, but it's not quite the same. And so, yeah, it was an interesting experience in the sense that I think they got a lot out of the lectures. And, they produced some really good work, but by the same token, it, from sort of a social perspective, they were missing that part of it. And so that was definitely something that was detrimental this year.
Yeah, actually, I think, Rachel, you raised a really good point about the experience, the student experience of learning online as a first year university student. And I think this really was brought home through my department when I got all these notices of advising me that some students were given extra credit or extra time because they were having issues. They were feeling a little overwhelmed. And what that taught me as a professor is empathy, to really question how we grade, what we expect from students, how we structure our rubrics, and just maybe let go a little bit of that and really just look at each individual student and say, okay, what do you need? What can I let go of? And just learn empathy. And that is, again, something that will come in very handy once we go back into in-person teaching. It's a good lesson to learn.
Yeah, absolutely. I totally agree. Yeah. In terms of moving forward, though, I think personally, I don't see this pandemic having like a very strict end. I see it becoming more endemic. I mean, they're talking about having a vaccine every year now, like similar to the flu vaccine. And so I think as, we move forward and as professors, we are going to need to figure out how to create a sort of hybrid space for our students and better, well, with empathy and understanding of students and what they need, better structure our courses around the needs of our students using sort of a hybrid method. And so that's going to be interesting moving forward to see how that will come about.
Yeah, I agree. And I think that's a really great opportunity just to look at the context in which we teach, because so often now what is blurred is this classroom home boundary, right? Already right now, I can see all of your homes and I saw all of my students' homes. And we gave in our class, a lot of like creative prompts and things to do at home. So actually a lot of the learning is taking place outside the box of the university context. And I think that genie's out of the bottle and should stay out of the bottle. Learning always happens outside of school. We're cramming all these ideas into people's heads and then they go out into their world. And this is where it starts to percolate and digest and they make connections. So why not encourage that more and sort of question the school, not school boundary a little bit more and leverage that, work with that. And I think it can lead to much richer learning experiences.
Well, I think that's interesting that you say that as well, because it ties perfectly in with what we're doing as public scholars in the sense that we want to be reaching out into communities. We want to be taking our research and making it applicable to everyone, not just, within the confines of this box. And I think, teaching moving forward, especially not just necessarily in the undergraduate degrees, but in graduate degrees as well, having courses that are structured around community engagement and using this kind of hybrid platform could be really interesting and really fruitful in the sense that we could be reaching communities with research outside of the academic institution. And, we could be teaching people to reach communities, and we could be encouraging, jobs that are outside of the institution as well. And of course, that would take into consideration, grad pro skills and all of these other amazing parts of the institution that we have access to as well. And so weirdly enough, I feel like the pandemic has given us a lot to think about in terms of this sort of hybridity of the way that teaching and learning is going to be moving.
Yeah, definitely time to bust out of the ivory tower. And I think that's such a great point that you make, that, we need to link more with the general public. And I really enjoyed that during that year, being given these opportunities and this training. And I think we've discussed this as a group, this should be something that maybe is open to more people, maybe to all PhDs, maybe do a course on how to engage with the general public, how to popularize your research, and not because we're being taught to APA style writing and how to be more fancy, how to, get published in a journal, which is so the opposite of what we're learning here in Public Scholars, which is so equally important. And is the whole raison d'etre why, like, I'm doing a PhD, it is so I can change aspects of society. So I want to talk to everybody. And, I was given a soapbox, and I think everybody else should be given a soapbox, maybe at least for one course. So I think it's for that the Public Scholar program has been really, really helpful.
Absolutely. Yeah, that would be brilliant, having an actual course just dedicated to the things that we're learning about through the Public Scholars program. Yes, I feel very privileged to be among these amazing people who you see on screen here. And just learning from them as much as learning from everything that, Rasha and everybody at with the Public Scholars team has been able to give us. And I think it would absolutely be beneficial for all PhD, well, maybe not even just PhD students, but maybe master's students as well, to have sort of a, hi, you're coming into a grad program and this is what you can do afterwards. You don't have to worry about it anymore. You get out of your program and you're like, wow, what am I going to do next? Oh crap, I didn't think of that far ahead. So, we have this course saying, here's all the interesting things you can do and whatnot. And I think that would be brilliant, actually. Yeah.
Yeah, totally agreed. And I agree with you. It's just been such a pleasure to meet people from other departments, because as a PhD student, you're just so focused on your own department and like your own little circle, and just to learn about what everybody else is doing, like, 3D printing organs and like, just all your research is just so amazing. And I just like, tell me more, please.
And the networking, that's the thing too, is so many things are about networking. And so being in courses with all kinds of different disciplines, if this is a mandatory course, being in a course with everybody and getting to meet all these people and making those connections and making the professional connections as well as personal, I think that's incredibly important for grad students. Because we're in our little, we're in our houses and we're doing our work and we're all alone and we're in our little disciplinary silos and not necessarily engaging with everyone. And I think, that's something that could change now that, things are hybrid, more so than not. And even, connecting with different universities, different people, different researchers, all of these things are opportunities for our grad students.
Yeah. I know that, Erica will always now be my go-to person for anything cyber cryptocurrency. We're going to have a talk about FTAs, non-fungible assets, right? You're my woman now.
Thank you very much, Rachel and Bettina. There's so much food for thought for SGS as well to see how we can expand this program further and offer a lot of these great opportunities to more students than just the public scholars. You touched upon a couple of points in your answers, and one was empathy and emotions and feelings and how hard the last year has been, which kind of brings us to our next theme, which is mental health, managing isolation in graduate research. I'll address this question to Sylvie and Anne-Marie. A PhD is already a solitary pursuit, contrary to what we just heard from Rachel and Bettina, demanding near superhuman discipline, self-motivation, and independent research. The pandemic is exacerbating the situation as lockdowns and curfews impact social and professional gatherings. Much of the PhD experience depends on the lively exchange of ideas with fellow students, collaborative projects, and building the network that will support you for the majority of your career. How did you overcome these pandemic challenges and recreate your support network? Do you feel the PhD prepared you to be more resilient in times of uncertainty? Do you think the resiliency you built during your PhD will be valuable in post-pandemic workplaces?
I think I'll go first, and then you can all crucify me if you like, because I'm almost ashamed to say that I found that I had it easy, in a manner of speaking, because I'm a very outgoing and extroverted person. And also, as a mother, I have this instinct to reach out to people and make sure everybody's okay. And I've learned a long, long time ago that nobody's ever going to take you by the hand and lead you. You have to make the effort. You have to find your way out of such situations, such as isolation. And I know that not everybody is like me. So from the get-go, I was always very attentive to look for signs between my fellow grad students to see that perhaps nothing was amiss, or is everything okay? Because we had a rather vibrant social life at our department prior to the pandemic. And I know that some of my fellow grad students, being international students, live alone, and they were far from home. And at the very early stages, everything was horrific all over the world, and it created an extra layer of stress for them. So initially, my instinct taught me that, I contacted a lot of people, and through the wonderful tools that we have, such as Zoom and FaceTime and whatever, and I've discovered so many of these tools that I had never used before, allowed me to reach out to people, and I like to think that I made a difference for some of them. On the professional aspect, since of course the very first few months nothing was happening, conferences were canceled, I was happily surprised to see the speed at which conferences moved online and offered these opportunities. I took part in 2 conferences myself, and I even organized one, the graduate biochemistry and chemistry conferences last fall. And I have the feeling that a lot of conferences are going to make use of these tools. And I don't know that we're going to see such large events as we used to, or perhaps go into a hybrid mode, into making the most of what's available to us right now. As far as resiliency goes, I think a lot of people discovered and are discovering now more than ever that everything is temporary. And no matter how bad it got at some point, if you just take like a year ago, for instance, we were in a pretty dark place. And a year later, we have a vaccine, and we're opening, as of today, we're opening vaccination to the general population. And to me, I mean, I was floored, because initially I never thought that we would have a vaccine so quickly. And I'm of the opinion that this is our way out of this difficult situation. So, well, call me optimistic, but I think that this forced, imposed break in our lives probably motivated a lot of us to do some soul searching and realize, what am I doing? Where am I going? And use this time constructively, knowing that eventually life will start all over again.
Thank you, Sylvie. Well, I can only speak from my experience, and I think we all have different personalities and different approach, and we're from, like we've mentioned before, from different fields, so different way of approaching our research and our relationships. Support networks are really important throughout the PhD process, and that's why there's the acknowledgement at the beginning of our thesis that is so important, to acknowledge all the people that have supported us. And I think also the pandemic for me, I mean, I'm interested in experiences in relation to built environment. So it has been like a lot of food for thought, a lot of things that I've reflected upon, being that I needed to rearrange, renegotiate my relationship with my home my own environment to write and to study. I mean, it has also emphasized the importance of connection, connection to people, and the way also that we connect and relate to people. And I think for me, it has amplified the importance of the relational aspect of my research and the relational aspect of research and knowledge. So the importance also of being connected to people. So yes, we have been able to connect with people through technologies and internet, but there is also that connection, that real connection with people, that the touch and the speaking and the face-to-face connection that we really need. And so I think it has also stressed the importance of that we cannot control everything, and that we must respect each other's way of apprehending time. And we have to let go. I mean, we have to learn to let go, and that we cannot always be super productive, and that we have to respect the human in us. Like I think it has been mentioned before that we need superhuman strength or resilience, but no, we're only humans, and we can only do the best that we can do. And we can, I think it has this pandemic has reminded us that we are only humans. And for the ones who have a field component like myself in their research, you can reorganize your research to accommodate the new restrictions, but or you can wait until you can do face-to-face and can do real field work and travel. So it has been a lot of work to reorganize things, but also, I mean, lesson in letting go.
Or is it also a lesson that we truly don't know what we have until we lose it? And then we're twice as happy to find it again and appreciate it more. And I think for a lot of us, this pandemic, and especially the lockdown part, allowed us to realize how lucky we were to begin. And it's not until you find yourself at a loss and unable to continue that you realize that the resources are there, and who's on your side and who's got your back. And it allows you to see things in a way that wouldn't have happened without. So there's a silver lining, I think. As far as mental illness goes, then of course, like I said earlier, we have to take stock and realize that it's only temporary, but at the same time, there's going to be a lot of healing left to do. And I think that this is an ongoing process, and there's still much work for us in that respect.
Yeah, and I think it also puts things in perspective. Like we put a lot of ourselves in our research and in our work, but it is work after all. It is not the entirety of our lives. We have our relationships, we have the people we love, our environment. So I think this has forced us to put things in perspective a little.
And I think it also brings us closer to our sense of purpose and our quest, because for me, graduate studies is a quest. We are looking for something, we're looking to achieve something. And being, I think it was like we were progressing with one hand tied behind our back and in the darkness, because so many, for you, for instance, not being able to do field work, you had to fall back on something else. And once we get back more or less to our usual programming, back into the swing of things, then we might approach several things with a very different mindset and in a different fashion.
And for many people, the PhD process is the first time you put together a research from A to Z. So really oversee from the research, building the research protocol to presenting the results. So in itself, this is a very anxiety arousing process to do that for the first time. So there's no way around it. I mean, it is learning is something that is difficult. You have to let go of your old, sometimes you have to let go to accept new knowledge. So I think there's no way around it. It is difficult. So we can't forget that even without the pandemic condition, it is a stressful process.
Mhm.
Yes, it is. And our mental health collectively has been challenged over the last year. Thank you so much, Sylvie and Anne-Marie. While you were speaking, you mentioned your field work, and that leads us to our next theme, which is environment and sustainability. I will address the question to Kiro and Isabel. Research collaboration, networking, and knowledge dissemination is central to the PhD. And prior to 2020, this involved international conferences, fieldwork, and inter-university exchanges. The pandemic forced these practices to adapt to closed borders and have made us all question the unsustainable trajectory of globalization. How significantly did lockdowns impact your own research and professional development? You're both advocates for sustainability and environmental impact awareness. How do you envision research collaboration and academic networking in the future? Do you have suggestions for how universities can adapt policies to encourage more environmentally conscious and sustainable practices?
Keganes, you want to go first?
Sure. If it's okay, I'll focus on the very last question regarding how universities can start to advance sustainability, because the reality is that our planet is on fire and universities barely meet a poorly written fire code. It boils down to the fact that we have to practice what we preach, because if we don't listen to our own scientists, how can we expect the world to? And this means two things to me. And I will use Concordia as my little case study because that is my home. And the first is that we need a lot more preaching. Fundamentally, universities exist to fulfill an academic mission. And the biggest and lasting impact we make is through our curriculum. Yet only 9% of Concordia graduates have any mention of sustainability in their degree programs. And that makes no sense. There are over 130 professors at Concordia, almost every single department, whose research is sustainability related. Sustainability is a Concordia core competency. So why aren't we teaching it? We need an institutional commitment that all Concordia students will be exposed to sustainability content in their curriculum. And I know that Concordia recently launched a sustainability plan that includes a curriculum component in which it commits to increasing sustainability in curriculum. Let's be honest, to just say that we're going to increase without quantifying what that means is simply not good enough. In my research, I cannot publish a statement like this. It's not credible. Now, to be fair, 9% is about the average in Canadian universities. And there are two exceptions to that. One is the University of Laval, where it's 90% of university graduates have learned about sustainability in their programs. Polytechnique is at 54% here at Montreal. So what did they do? In 2009, about 12 years ago, University of Laval made an institutional commitment saying that all their undergraduate programs have to teach sustainability. And that's what led to the 90% achievement that they have right now of all their graduates learning about their sustainability in their programs. By the way, last year also Carleton University launched its own sustainability plan in which it committed that all students graduating from Carleton will have exposure to sustainability principles. One of the points that Brad talked about in his op-ed in the University Affairs was how professional development being ancillary to graduate studies right now is simply not good enough, and we need to integrate it in a more fulsome way. And I think we need to adopt the same thinking about sustainability. The second point I want to make is about the need to do more practicing. So in addition to curriculum, our mission as a university is to help government and private organizations develop and adopt evidence-based policy that is founded on sound scientific research. And an important component in doing that is leading by the example of our own policies. So last time Concordia had a waste audit, for example, was in 2013. That's 8 years ago. But last year, when we launched our sustainability plan that has a waste stream, we have to ask, well, based on what was that plan made? Why would the academic community at Concordia University have faith in plans like this? And so the last thing I will say on this is that we need to see our internal operation and policies as an extension to our research, because things like this do great disservice to the world-class researchers we have. of course we know that we should collect data before coming up with plans. So one of the things that the Public Scholar program was built on is contributing to public policy. We have the opportunity of using our own institution as a living lab and fully engage as researchers, professors, and students in the development of our own policies. Now, the global climate strike a couple of years ago was the largest protest in history, and Montreal has the largest turnout of any city in the world. All kinds of people participated, of course, but it was led by CJEP and high schoolers. In other words, future Concordia students. And these students will make their decision, including where they go to study, based on the credibility assessment they make on the actions that universities take to fight the waste and climate crisis. So I think it's very important that we take this seriously.
Mm-hmm. So I will go in the same perspective as Caroles. So in order to develop transdisciplinary skills, by that I mean skills that reach beyond disciplinary specializations and contribute to a sustainable and quality living environment, I think that collaboration with partners outside of academia should be an integral part of curriculums. The expression knowledge holders to knowledge brokers exactly translate this idea of building networks with partners such as NGO, artists, scientists, and other professionals to respond to the complexity of future challenges and with a wider range of perspectives. So we also have a lot to learn from our immediate environment. For that reason, we must develop practices that are not only effective, but also creative, participative, and responsible. Initiating students to a diversity of knowledge will be a good way to prepare them for social and environmental impacts, take position on important issues, and find greater resilience while facing anxiety related to climate change, as well as political and economic uncertainties. Increasing interest in virtual research and practices has made it possible to create new spaces that enable creators and researchers to meet and disseminate knowledge, but also to reduce time spent commuting and the need to travel to international conferences, for example, which can be associated with financial stress. I believe that research collaboration should continue to offer both virtual and physical support systems in order to contextualize experiences and keep the connection between places, spaces, and people, while maintaining the flexibility benefits online meeting can offer. So what the Public Scholar program has enabled me to learn this year is that our PhD reach can be expanded by not only considering writing for peer-reviewed journals, but also thinking a little bit out of the box and participating in activities that can attract a wider public by the use of social media or newspapers. So I think that we touch upon like different points since the beginning. Like we talked about empathy, we talked about flexibility and resilience. And I think that as Caroles mentioned, we really need to include more sustainable perspective. But I would also say like a non-environmental education in each domain of learning, and to really connect not only virtually, but physically with the environment in which we live together and build something that is more relational, which has been very difficult within the pandemic. But this is for me like something that really needs to be worked on for the future of scholars.
Isabel, the first your first op-ed that you wrote was talking about how there should be more sustainability curriculum in I think it was high school, so it was one of those degrees, and you talked about using art to do that. And one of the things that usually come up when I complain about how little there's sustainability in curriculum is that it might not belong to all kinds of fields. And you're teaching art, and I'm wondering if you can maybe reflect a little bit on your experience teaching environment and sustainability in art programs.
Well, even I can talk with this with my colleague Bettina, which is really involved in science also. But I believe that art is very powerful in the way that it can relate to the affective side of people, the sensibility and the senses, which when it's combined with the affective can really touch people and make them think and reflect upon different aspects of the reality. And then the other thing about art is that it's the aspect of sharing knowledge and not only creating an object, but just creating something together that can build at the moment, in the present, when you are just discussing about something, and then something is just gonna build on as the story. And then I think that's why I believe that art has a really important role to play within collaborative work.
Thank you, Isabel.
Thank you, Kira and Isabel. Great thoughts. There was a subject that permeated all the answers in the previous questions. That was communication. You talk about sharing knowledge and networking. And that brings us to our next theme, which is reaching beyond academic audiences in digital media fluency. I will address the question to Marc-André and Hamid. Concordia's Public Scholars Program aims to bring the subject matter expertise that doctoral students acquire to the wider community. How was your public scholar experience impacted by the pandemic? This past year, as we have been isolated and limited to online interactions, we have seen fake and sensational news circulate at frightening speeds and have negative consequences. This reinforces the need for informed views, such as those cultivated in the PhD, to be heard by the public. As we imagine the future of the PhD, how can professional communication skills be further integrated into doctoral education?
Marc-André, do you want to go first?
Sure.
Yeah.
I think out of my cohort, I have had a very unique experience as it comes to public communications and my research, especially at regards not only the topic of mis and disinformation, but specifically as my research focused on the QAnon movement, which went from a very fringe topic to something that is making headlines on a weekly basis. And I've had to learn very quickly on how to handle ways of expressing what I was simply doing as an academic exercise and summing it down to not only a general public, but also to media and policymakers and platforms, and being able to explain what was basically academic jargon, though good academic jargon, in a way that was easily accessible to the community. And this is not something that you learned in academia. And it's something that I've had to develop very quickly, where at some points I was getting 200 interview requests on a weekly basis. And this is not something that academics were prepared for. But what I did learn is we live in an age now where the traditional speed and rate at which academic information is disseminated through conferences, conference proceedings, journal articles, book publications is not sufficient to express the knowledge that we have to have a tangible impact on our societies. And discovering avenues, whether it's through posting through social media or publishing in places like The Conversation, where you're trying to summarize your academic thinking into 800-word blurbs, or you're trying to summarize them via infographics and creating visuals that could target a different audience, is an exercise in practicing. And I think the 3MT through the Public Scholar Program was the first exercise of trying to sum down something very complex into 3 minutes. But the pandemic taught me even more that summing it down sometimes into a couple of tweets or into 800 words or into just an infographic, trying to summarize that and explain it in a way that a general public can consume is very important. Because as time has gone on, the academic research that I've produced have influenced policymakers, the platforms. Journalists are regularly contacting me even just for background information. It shows that research has an influence on how the public will perceive a specific topic. And you need to be able to communicate that in an efficient way, not only to make sure that your research has an impact, but it's also well represented, because those who are asking the questions are not experts and may misrepresent or misunderstand what you're doing. And in the context of COVID, if you're talking about contexts that are about medical disinformation from the perspective of public health crisis or related to violent extremism, there are actual potential real world impacts related to what you're saying. And I think that plays an important role. So some of my colleagues here might be the face of this in the future. When you think about climate change, it's probably the next massive frontier when it comes to disinformation or public crisis. Those who are working in these fields, whether you know it or not, you're going to be at the forefront of the next social crisis, at the forefront of the net disinformation campaign. For the upcoming grads and undergrads at Concordia, they're going to be living through this and researching through this. How can they be better prepared to communicate with this? And I think providing a means, when we're talking about practical applications, how do you summarize academic work to a policymaker that was going to decide how climate change policies are going to be developed in Canada? How do you explain your research to a social media platform with billions of users, whether or not they should deplatform a specific group and what the impacts of that are? How do you communicate people about new technologies, whether it's cryptocurrencies, to demystify misunderstandings and information? A lot of us have had to develop these skills on our own, or we've learned them through the real world. But I think this is something that we need to teach. And it's not only how to communicate efficiently online, but how to be safe as academics as well. Consequence of being in the spotlight with your research is targeted harassment, death threats, that whole 9 yards. That's another thing that you don't get trained on. I think that teaching grads and undergrads digital hygiene, how to communicate, how to present your research in a succinct and efficient way to the general public is something that we need to integrate, because Concordia has a very good pool of researchers and students. And it's a shame that it is not featured more often than not. And my research might have been not featured if it wasn't for the fact that the world literally went to hell because of a pandemic and a fringe movement decided to riot on Capitol Hill and whatever you want, right? It shouldn't take extremes for the research of Concordia students and professors to be spotlight on. I think being able to communicate and translate that should be a priority.
Yeah, to add some point to Marc-André's opinion, I would like to share my own experience during the PhD and in the public scholar program. First of all, regardless of pandemic, I personally believe the researcher like me as an engineer to study in the field that are less involved in communication with general public usually have their own technical language, which is common in their field of research. But when it comes to the diverse audience, it doesn't provide the technical language doesn't provide the useful information for general public, and it can even to some extent confuse them. We all know what we are doing in our research. We are all interested in our work, and we are doing our best in the PhD. But having the good PhD outcomes is one thing, and obtaining professional skill of communication, such as presenting your research to the general audience, the diverse audience, industrial partner, or even a young researcher who are interested to continue their education in your field are as important as our PhD work. To me, we all as a PhD student should focus on the presenting our work at different platforms And being in the public scholar program helped me personally, to explain the complex research to the general audience by getting trained in op-ed and social media fluency, opportunity to present at different platforms such as 3MC. And being involved in these platforms will let the public know about what we are doing in our research. And if we do this job properly, in return, we will receive the feedbacks and will ultimately improve our research. This is exactly what happened to me. But the question might be is it the opportunity available for 10 PhD students per year? The answer is definitely not. No, it's true. The public scholar program offers a solid training and prepared platform for this purpose. But Concordia grad pro skills and public scholar program currently presenting different opportunity you can get from the workshop trainings, and you can get the tons of opportunity at Concordia. You just need to come out of your comfort zone and be in touch with the Concordia and public scholar alumni and public scholar program. Another point I would like to add regarding the pandemic, we all agree that pandemic has a significant effect on our researchers and the research center. We got psychological, financial, negative impact because of this pandemic. But if we look on the the past year, it seems we get more communication just because of this virtual world. Now we are able to attend the conferences, workshops, meetings in all over the world as possible. And another point the pandemic had for us, we all became familiar with the virtual world. And all that to say, this virtual global communication is the least baggage we should have with us after the pandemic. And it will definitely open up the worldwide collaboration and improve and speed up our PhD research.
And I think one thing that's important for a lot of the colleagues, and something I learned or benefited from the aspect of communication, is there are a lot more resources out there available to you when those who have funds or technology or tools understand what you're working on. And some people might be looking for specific expertise or want to fund a specific project that's close to their hearts, or even organizations looking to bring on researchers to support with work, and being able to translate your stuff to those who are going to want to recruit you or hire you is important, because they're not technical experts, but the ones who hold the purses or hold the keys to these organizations need to understand that you're the expert they want. And I think that's an important skill to have, especially as the pandemic has shown. Multidisciplinary research, bringing in, a social scientist with an engineer, with someone who works in the medical field, is not weird anymore. And having us collaborate on something together, we need to be able to talk to each other, but we need to be explained to those who want to fund research or showcase our research why it's important to present it. And I think these type of skills, this hybrid methodology, is not going to go away with the pandemic, and it really has changed how academia functions. And we need to integrate that into graduate programs, but even in undergrad programs.
Yeah.
Thank you very much, Marc-Andre and Hamid. And we're moving to the last leg of our panel discussion, which is on PhD outcomes and integrated professional development. As you're approaching the end of your PhD, do you feel your program prepared you for the career you aspired? How did your career plans evolve over the course of your program, and did the pandemic have any impact on this? What advice would you have for students starting their PhD to prepare them for the post-pandemic labor market? Do you have suggestions for how universities can support them in reaching their career objectives? I'll address this question to Erica and Ehsan.
Great, thanks a lot. Ehsan, you want to start?
Yes, sure. Actually, both program, public scholar program and PhD program, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Both public scholar program and PhD program have helped me to improve soft and hard skills and made me ready for my inspired job. First, let me start with public scholar program. In public scholar program, I've learned how to present my project with a simple and straightforward language while catching the attention of audience. I think it's important. It's really important in a career interview. And I was trained how to sum up and express my ideas and solution clear to my colleagues, to my supervisor, and in future for manager, leaders, and external clients. About my PhD program, I've tried to improve, learn technical skills, and to be professional in those skills.
Great. Well, I'll say that I'm the first one of our cohort that's graduating. I'm defending my thesis next month, and I see my supervisors on the call, so I'm defending next month. And I will be starting my job July 1st. I'll be starting as an assistant prof at Queen's University. So I think I have a very traditional outcome. I think Queen's is a wonderful school. It's one of the best in the country, a very resource-rich school. And I think it's kind of the golden opportunity that you really want at the end of your PhD. Now, how did that happen? Concordia had a heck of a lot to do with it. And my supervisor and my committee had a heck of a lot to do with it. I think what changed for me as I went through is I realized I could do a lot better than I thought I could when I started off. You know, my supervisor was behind me saying, you know, Erica, we're going to submit to top journals. We're going to get you out of those conferences. You're going to go on exchange. And I really approached it like a project. Like, this is my career. I want to get to the top echelons of my career. How are we going to get there? And I think because I'm in the business school, I don't feel bad talking about an academic career in that very commercial, neoliberal language. I accept that universities have been commercialized, whether I agree with it or not, they have been. So if I want to ascend to the top ranks, I need to start to think about, when I start my PhD, what do I want to get at the end? And I think of a lot of supervisors talk about academic work as if it's some type of intellectual calling, as if it's only pure to talk about it in terms of scholarly pursuits. Well, at some point we have to talk about a PhD as vocational training, if we really are preparing folks for the vocation of becoming a professor. And so what I appreciated about Concordia is that my supervisor, the folks in my department, were very supportive of that view. And we were very honest with each other about what my career outcomes, what could I aspire for, what could I hope for. And so the programs like the Public Scholar Program, which don't exist anywhere else in this format, as we discussed at the beginning, are the types of things that will let you stand out on the job market. When I had my interview at Queen's, what I talked about with the dean and the associate dean of research was my public scholarship. That's all we talked about. And they were so impressed. And I know that put me at the top of the pile. So my career plans have evolved. And I'm just really, really glad that I ended up at a school at Concordia that supports, you know, that type of outlook that says, you know, we need to prepare you for getting a job as much as we need to prepare you to be a great scholar, a great thinker, and a great writer. So if I can make any suggestions to folks who are coming up in the PhD, I'd say start planning. Start planning. Think about where you want to go and start working backwards, because that's the only way you're going to get there.
Start planning. Go ahead, Hassan.
Actually, I would like to mention about my career plans that's involves over the course of my program. I think it's one of my career plans is to be a leader engineer or leader researcher. I think the public scholar has enhanced my communication skills that is important to be a professional leader. Through the program, I could develop my networks with researchers and engineers in like LinkedIn, Twitter, and to build more job opportunity for me. And so if I wanted to have suggest for new students, new PhD students, I can say they try to develop their connection, because of what I know, many job opportunity aren't posts online and they're hidden. So if they increase their connection, they can get those jobs earlier after graduation. And finally, point I think I would like to mention is like the university has an essential role in like program in supportive students and make them ready for labor market. For example, the university can hold many workshops, such as like a workshop how to write academic resume or like industrial resume, because I saw some PhD students like after their graduation, they send academic resume for when they want to apply for a company, and they don't know what's the difference between academic resume, and industrial resume. So far in this area, I think the Concordia University has supported students, especially PhD students, very well. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Hassan and Erica. I would like to thank all our panelists actually for sharing your experiences during the pandemic. Some invaluable suggestions came through today. Discussions for both students, faculty, and staff to be had in days and weeks and months to come. So at this point, we'll open up the floor to questions from the audience. I think our viewing will change to gallery. And I'll start with the first question. Can you briefly explain the engagement with the public aspect of the program? I loved the 3-minute presentation event last week. So which one of our public scholars would like to answer this question? Nobody? Oh.
Hamid has his hand
Yes.
up.
Yes.
Yeah. To answer this question, I can share my own experience. In public scholar program, you definitely will get the training for different things like op-ed. As I mentioned in my talk, you will get the training for the op-ed writing, blog writing, how to communicate, how to write for the general audience. Those are all matter of the public, engagement with the public, and you will get trained. But as a part of the program, you can attend the 3-minute thesis, but it's not only available for the people who are in the public scholar program. I personally participate in 3MT before my public scholar program, and I think it's a good start because you will get the idea what you will be expected in the program, and yeah, those are the points I can add for the public engagement in the program.
Thank you, Hamid. Our next question. Some people also come into PhD programs with already existing mental health issues. How can we make the PhD process more accessible to these people? The pressures of academia are also very real and affect people on different levels. Unequal distribution of funding, pressure to publish while also teaching and trying to complete a dissertation. It's nice to be positive, but it will not change the structural issues embedded within the academy. What is our role as PhD researchers and educators in challenging these demands? Rachel, the floor is yours.
Yeah, I think that's a really, really great question. And I think it's something that we don't consider very often when, you know, we're talking about masters and PhDs, in the sense that, you know, we're just sort of automatically expected to be able to function properly within the academic sphere and have no problems with all of the pressures put on us. And I think in terms of our role as researchers, we have to kind of go backwards and figure out what it is that's causing these problems. Like, obviously you've made some comments in terms of like what could be causing issues, but there's also the isolation, for instance, of the PhD program. I know in my discipline, which is actually interdisciplinary humanities, I have 3 different disciplines that I'm working within. And because of that, I haven't really found a space that I really belong to, because I'm so spread out between all 3. So I've sort of really found people along the way, but not really found like a home that I belong to. And I think, you know, creating a space that helps to take away some of the isolation of the PhD programs would be really helpful. So, you know, things like even getting PhDs together, even if it's on a Zoom call to talk about things, improving like funding for mental health specifically for grad students. I mean, there's a lot of things that we could do, but we really need to sort of focus on like the problems, exactly what the problems are, before we can really fix them. Because yeah, it is a structural issue, but there's so many things involved in that structural issue that it's going to take some time to sort everything out.
Thank you, Rachel. Great suggestions.
Can I just add something?
Yes, of course.
As Rachel just pointed out, changing the mentality on an institutional level fundamentally will take time. But what is a great asset, I find, is the peer support within your group, within the people that you see every day, even if they're not within your own department. Then of course you should never neglect the power of peer support, which is what we can act on now. So be mindful of others around you, and look out for signs that people are distressed, and be attuned and know where the resources are, because every university, especially at Concordia, there are resources for people who are struggling. And if you know from the get-go that you are more fragile in that sense, pick a program and do your homework upstream of getting admission, and see where your resources are should you ever find yourself in a difficult situation.
Indeed. Our next question is for Erica. Has the public scholar program changed your perspective on career outside academia?
I'd like to answer that a little bit orthogonally, in the sense there's an academic word for you, orthogonally. Because I think people dismiss academic careers because they think they're stuffy, and they think they're boring, and they think that they're very traditional. But I encourage people to think about academia as a platform to engage with the broader public. And that's what the Public Scholar Program has taught me. So right now I'm working on an initiative with a prof at York. We're trying to come up with a way to train academics to engage, just like we've done the Public Scholar Program. So what the Public Scholar Program has caused me to do is not to change my perspective of wanting to leave academia, but rather to reorient myself within academia and pull a lot of other people along with me, to say, I'm not just here to publish in journals, I'm here to actually make an impact on the world. So I would encourage Tanya, if you are thinking about doing a PhD, think about the ways you can do that and really help academia move forward and stay relevant.
Thank you, Erica. Kira will answer the next question. How do you define public or wider community? And is public scholarship just about broadcasting? Is it one-way communication?
I think being a public scholar, it's something that I reflected on when we started this program. I think being a public scholar means different things to different people. I think in one way you could talk about science communication, where we're communicating our own research to the general public. I find that to be too narrow, and from my perspective, I like to think about being a public scholar as applying a scholarly approach to issues of public interest. It doesn't necessarily have to be my own research. And I think the problems that we're having in our social discourse right now are so complex, and there's so much information out there. A lot of it is also disinformation. Marc-André talked about that, and just helping people navigate through all of this and through all this these complex problems and all the nuance that exists in a simple way is something that requires a lot of analytical skills that we develop through our PhD. So why aren't every PhD student is able to engage with the public and help them think through these issues? And so from my point of view, I think it's not necessarily talking about our own research, but also finding the issue of the day and helping people think through it through the analytical skills that we develop in our PhD programs. I think Bettina has something to add.
Yes, and I totally agree with what Kara said. It's a two-part question. So how do we bring it to the wider audience? I noticed that many of us, me included, did not just write op-eds and blog posts, but that we also did workshops where we engage the general audience in participating in our research. So, I gave an online drawing class about extremophiles, those crazy creatures that shouldn't be alive on Earth, that like hot lava tube vents and salty environments and those kind of things. And I think, Rachel, you did also a really cool online workshop about your research. And that I love this kind of approach, because it isn't just broadcasting, because that's such a good point, and not just talking heads. We find ways to draw the public in and make our sort of demonstrate firsthand why our research is relevant. So I hope that the Public Scholar program will continue to push us to have public events like all of us did. Isabel also, yes, go ahead.
Yes, I wanted to add that as PhD, we want, well, with the program, that the program has enabled us to make our research accessible. And it really, really helped me this year to think about how I can inform the public about my research within more familiar words, with words that are more friendly user. And for me, this is a way to have a social impact, to disseminate knowledge within the social media, the newspaper. It was really beneficial for me, and I learned a lot from that. And I think that as researchers, we really need to go outside of the academia and really connect with the public. I think that's something that we really need to work on, especially when we're talking about how the complexity of the reality in which we're dealing with, right? We have the pandemic, we have the climate change, we have a lot of things we want to solve. When I'm looking at what everyone here is working on, and I think that's it really this connection that we need to make all together if we want to advance and change things.
Thank you. We have a question for Isabel and Bettina. You both touched on art as a universal means for knowledge mobilization and the Public Scholars Program as a means for developing relationality and heightened empathy. Can you speak to the challenges you experienced trying to disseminate your research via social media? Were you concerned about the risk of oversimplifying your research to the degree it might dull its potential for impact? Isabel and Bettina.
Yes, I'm reflecting about the question.
Well, actually, I can start because you mentioned social media. I was afforded the opportunity to do like a social media virtual residency with Fourth Space, because of the pandemic, my ability to do data collection just disappeared. And I had to find an alternative. Fourth Space stepped in and said, we're here for you. Do you want to do something online? So I did a 1-week online residency and used social media, actually. We were on Twitter and on Facebook, and anywhere else on Instagram. And I had actually worked out a series of questions and art prompts that related very closely to my research. And I could measure how much engagement I got from people and what conversations that sparked. I did the aforementioned drawing workshop and used Mozilla Hubs to create an exhibition of my work and give a presentation there, and people could chat with each other and interact with digital virtual artworks. So it was a really great opportunity to actually leverage social media that's kind of looked down upon a little bit, because Twitter is not the nicest space, and Marc-André has highlighted that point, but you can use it. You can absolutely use it without sinking to the lowest level of what that medium, you can bottom out, but this is a skill that we also need to learn, also how to manage social media and those kind of platforms. And that is, I saw that also as part of my research and how to best manage that. Isabel, how about you?
Yes, it's quite incredible how we switch from something completely very different in a year. But there was a lot of challenges within the aspect of my research, because especially about the restrictions, we were not allowed to, to go to places and work with people there. And so our connection with the environment was kind of restrained, and for me, this is a big concern, a big issue, that if we only, expecting to work online, then where is our connection with the environment? And we have to think about that for the future. But it has its advantages of working online, as you mentioned. But I think how to deal with those kind of hybrid two ways of doing our practice, and when people need to go working in the field. There are big concerns in relations to how to connect to the environment and work with immediate problems and trying to solve the problems that are around us. Yes.
I wanted to add something, if I may.
Yes.
This question is about knowledge mobilization, and knowledge mobilization is not only about the research, transfer activities, or how you you put your research result. It's all about the process. And if you want to, I think Isabel mentioned it previously, if you want to assure a better impact of your research, there are ways and processes that you can use such as involving communities in the determination of the research objective or research questions, and collaborative research processes. So there are a lot of things that are involved in knowledge mobilization, or increasing the impact of research, more than just the diffusion or dissemination activities. Thank you.
Great. We have a question for Rachel. Do you have any suggestions on how we can make our research more sustainable at Concordia?
Yeah, that one I think I did by accident. I don't know, does Carol maybe want to take care of that one? Yeah.
Sure. It's actually one of those things that make me cry a little bit, just because I'm a material, like my research is material engineering. So all I do is mix chemicals and hope they don't blow up in my face. But the problem is that I have to use a lot of disposable gloves, like for safety. I have to use a lot of disposable material. And so, as some of you know, I run this project called Waste Not Whatnot at Concordia, which talks a lot about waste and trying to help people reduce waste. But then I go to my own research lab and I'm using all these things that I have to throw in the garbage every single day. So it does make me cry. And just in the, like recently, obviously, as more conscious I become about this, I've been trying to think of ways to reduce my own waste in the lab. And what they found to be the best way to do that is to plan. So without, obviously you cannot compromise safety. You always have to use the proper safety equipment. And if you have to throw those away, you have to throw them away. But if you have to go to the lab and do your experiments just randomly all over the place, then you have to use more of those personal protective equipment. But if you plan and you try to sort of combine all these activities at the same time, then you don't have to use as many personal protective equipment because you always use the same ones through all the different activity. So what I found worked really well for me, and obviously different things work for different people, is that if you plan ahead and think through every step, how do you minimize how do you minimize the amount of personal protective equipment you have to throw away, then that's how you reduce your waste. The other thing is that we have glasswares in chemistry labs. And my advice is to use those more often. I think we get a little bit lazy about washing and cleaning, and not all the experiments require to have a sterile environment where you have to use new things every single time. And so at the beginning of my research, I used a lot of disposable vials, for example, for my samples. But as I think about it, it became clear that I don't really need to throw away the vial every single time. And so if I wash it and use it again, if I wash it properly, then I reduce my waste this way. Again, it depends really on your research and how sensitive it is to contamination and things like that. But this is the different things that worked for me.
Thank you, Kira. And I think we have to stop the Q&A here because I need to leave a couple of minutes for our guest and partner to the Public Scholars Program, Lucinda Choden from Montreal Gazette. She has a few words for us. Lucinda, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. And thanks everyone for the stimulating, inspiring discussion this afternoon. One of the things that I think, I mean, for me, there were two themes that emerged in today's discussion. One was the very much glass half full nature of the participants. Most participants seem to see the pandemic as actually an opportunity to re-examine how their research was being done and how their collaborations were being done. It was an opportunity to examine connections and possibly to reinvent what they were doing. The second thing that also emerged, I think in almost every conversation, was the true value that the public scholars process has added to people's academic development and professional development as someone who was not apart from the community, but a larger part of the community. The summation of the whole set of experiences seemed to be that, number one, a hybrid of the traditional approach and this new digital platform would allow people to truly emerge from the sort of stereotype of an ivory tower, but to move outside the box of the academic community or the actual physical campus and into the community. Second, that it was a way to sort of look at student-focused learning more than the traditional top-down pushing things out as professors engaged with their students and tried to make sure that they could keep up. Also, the vital importance of sort of developing real-time reflexes, Marc-Andre, particularly with the spiraling chaos of what happened in the United States, but also QAnon, misinformation, disinformation, how valuable the public scholars training was in terms of real-time responses to real-time events, and how it was important to continue to spread that training and in fact enhance it so that more scholars would have an opportunity to find different ways of engaging the community. All in all, I think it was a true testament to what the Public Scholars Program has set out to do, which is help people engage outside academia with people in the community and demonstrate the relevance of what's happening at Concordia and other universities around the world to what is happening in the real world. What a privilege to be here.
Thank you, Lucinda. The privilege is ours to have you. And this brings our event to an end. I would like to take this opportunity to thank first and foremost our panelists, because without you and your provoking thoughts and comments and discussions and ideas, none of this would be any worth. I would like to thank Fourth Space for hosting our event, the Gazette for being such an invaluable partner, Brad Nelson for always pushing the envelope on graduate programs. Our audience, we're doing this for you, and we're happy you're here to listen to us and question us and challenge us. To Rasha and Christy for being instrumental behind this event. Thank you all, and we will see you soon to another event for Space.